Some sunshine. Temperatures around about average for the time of year, turning a little milder in the southwest, but it will also be turning breezier and wetter. In fact, we'll all see some rain, I think, through this evening. That rain spreading over the Midlands into eastern England. Could get quite heavy for a time through the late part of the evening across East Anglia and the southeast before that scoots away during the early hours. And then skies start to clear once more and we're left with a few showers across the west. Will turn quite cold, and as it does so, we could just see things turning a little icy across parts of Scotland. So that's just something to be aware of first thing in the morning. Basically, it's a bright sunny start across much of eastern England and the south, and then we'll see showers developing through the day. Quite a few showers for northwest England, North Wales, Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Here the showers will come and go throughout. A few for South Wales, southwest England. The odd one getting further east, but much of eastern England, southern England, dry and fine. Temperatures again around average, but feeling a little colder because there will be a fairly brisk and chilly wind blowing tomorrow. That'll keep blowing in showers across these western areas well into Friday evening, whereas again further east largely dry and clear, and that hint of blue suggesting quite an early frost, leading to a chilly start to the weekend, but it will slowly turn milder. Bit of a mishmash this weekend. Won't rain all weekend, but there will certainly be some around, and it'll be breezy.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And welcome once again to On the Money, your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be covering the Scottish budget, which is set to be unveiled this afternoon, and asking what future for the North Sea oil and gas industry. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Olivia Guthrie.
Hello, this is your news at 1 o'clock. The Cabinet Secretary will now investigate 3 alleged parties in Downing Street and Whitehall during lockdown last year. During urgent questions in the House of Commons, Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis said they're looking into several claims. It comes after a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about an alleged Downing Street party forced the resignation of government aide Allegra Stratton. Here's what Paymaster General had to say in the Commons earlier.
Now, I can confirm to the House that the Cabinet Secretary's investigation will establish the facts surrounding the following. Allegations made of a gathering at Number 10 Downing Street on the 27th of November 2020, a gathering at the Department for Education on the 10th of December 2020, and allegations made of a gathering at number 10 Downing Street on the 18th of December 2020.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson's facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. New restrictions include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, whilst guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Mr Johnson has denied bringing forward announcements to divert attention from the row. Conservative MP Andrew Rossendale has told GB News he'll vote against the measures.
I understand why, when the pandemic hit to begin with, none of us knew what we were facing, and the government was right to take action. Since then, I think that it has been a huge overreaction and we're not calculating the effects of lockdowns. So why, at this very point, when we're looking forward to Christmas, when businesses are really at their peak in terms of what they need to do for Christmas, to then restrict things, I don't really understand why we're doing it.
Dominic Raab and Grant Shapps are self-isolating after being in contact with the Australian Deputy Prime Minister, who has since tested positive for coronavirus. Barnaby Joyce confirmed the news while travelling in Washington, D.C. The ministers had both met Mr Joyce when he was in London earlier in the week. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross is also self-isolating after a member of his staff tested positive for COVID. Boris Johnson is facing renewed questions into a donation used to pay for the redecoration of his Downing Street flat. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner has accused the Prime Minister of lying when he said he didn't know who was behind the payment. The Electoral Commission says the Conservative Party failed to accurately report a donation and keep a proper accounting record. It's fined the Tories £17,800. A party spokesperson says they're considering an appeal. Nearly 1 in 4 people celebrating Christmas will struggle to afford it this year. That's according to research from a national debt charity. Step Change found that 1 in 12 will borrow to pay for festive spending, with a quarter taking a year or more to pay the money back. The aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth is returning home today following the loss of a £100 million fighter jet at sea. The Royal Navy flagship had originally been expected to return to Portsmouth tomorrow, but that was brought forward due to concerns about the weather. In November, an F-35B Lightning jet crashed into the Mediterranean after tumbling off the flight deck. The jet's pilot escaped unharmed. A member of the carrier's crew has been arrested on suspicion of leaking video footage of the incident. And Boris Johnson and his wife Carrie have announced the birth of a baby girl at a London hospital earlier today. It's the couple's second child after the birth of their son Wilfred in April 2020. A spokeswoman for the couple said both mother and daughter are doing very well. You're right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now back to Liam.
And this is On the Money. Today, our eyes are fixed north of the border, where Scotland's SNP government will this afternoon be unveiling the annual Scottish budget. Amidst talk of NHS spending and money for local authorities, we'll be focusing also on the North Sea oil and gas industry, once seen as vital in the case for Scottish independence. Not so much now, though, with the SNP in coalition with the Scottish Greens. Plus, for today's Start-up Britain, we'll be joined by James Constantinou, the founder of Prestige Pawnbrokers. He'll tell us about the weird and wonderful artefacts he's been presented with over the years, including the world's largest pearl. And we'll also be discussing regulation of a sector disproportionately used by poorer and more vulnerable households. That's later in the show. And as ever, send in your questions, opinions, suggestions. What do you think of On the Money? This is your show too. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. So stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Scottish Finance Secretary Kate Forbes pointed to very difficult choices as she drew up Holyrood's budget, which will be unveiled this afternoon. COVID-19 still poses acute problems, observed the SNP minister. But Forbes said her priorities include tackling child poverty, helping businesses recover from lockdown, and the transition to net zero carbon emissions. Holyrood's budget is now bigger than ever, with a £35 billion block grant to be allocated. SNP ministers complain the money sent to Scotland by the rest of the UK isn't enough. That's politics. For many years, though, that grant has ensured government spending north of the border has been disproportionately high. The latest figures show in 2019-20, public spending per person in Scotland was £11,565. That's 17% above that average for the UK as a whole. The equivalent figure in England was £9,604, 3% below the UK average. Scotland gets less than Northern Ireland, which receives £11,987 per head, but a lot more than Wales, where government spending is £10,929 per person. Now, many who campaigned against independence ahead of the 2014 referendum argued that Scotland is subsidised by the rest of the UK and by England in particular. That tension's always in the background whenever the Scottish budget is announced. More recently, though, there's been another big twist, with Nicola Sturgeon's party now reliant on Green Party seats to form a working majority at Holyrood. For many years, though, certainly during that 2014 referendum, the SNP's case for independence was based in part on North Sea oil. The UK's oil and gas industry drills mostly off the Scottish coast, so the oil and gas is Scottish, the SNP has often argued. If that was recognised, the party used to say an independent Scotland would then be wealthier than the UK and than England, even without the block grant. Yet the Greens vehemently oppose an expansion or even a continuation of the very North Sea oil industry, upon which the SNP once justified its economic case for independence. In her budget today, Kate Forbes is promising to significantly increase Scotland's NHS spending while protecting the settlement for local councils. Ferries under construction at the nationalised Ferguson shipyard have got to be finished, she says. No ifs, no buts. SNP First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has meanwhile transformed herself from a champion of Scotland's oil to a fully convinced environmentalist. It is fundamentally wrong, she says, to keep looking for and developing North Sea oil and gas, warning that permission for drilling in the Cambo oil field off Shetland should not get the go-ahead. Little wonder, then, that the mighty Shell have just pulled out of this project. Over two-thirds of the UK's energy was generated by oil and gas as recently as 2019, yet only 7 exploration wells were drilled in the North Sea last year. That's the least since 1965. Whatever you think of shifting away from fossil fuels, and we can certainly debate that, we will need oil and gas for the foreseeable future, and the North Sea has much to offer. Scottish Tories now want Boris Johnson to declare his support for the North Sea oil and gas industry, which supports around 100,000 jobs. The Scottish Greens, meanwhile, argue that only, quotes, the hard right now supports continued drilling in the North Sea. And that's our on-the-money question today. On the day the Scottish budget is unveiled, could environmentalism kill the North Sea oil and gas industry? This is On the Money. We're all about grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. Talking of which, my expert panel today. We got friend of the show, Edinburgh West MP and Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman, Christine Jardine. Always good to see you, Christine. A pleasure also to welcome the Director of Devolved Nations at the Federation for Small Businesses, Colin Borland. The Chief Executive of the Centre for Economics and Business Research, Nia Scaro, is with us. And in the studio, it's On the Money regular, founder of moneymagpie.com. We can't keep her away. It's Jasmine Birtles. Good to see you too, Jasmine, as ever. Let's start with Nina Scaro. Nina, we're not here to discuss only the Scottish oil and gas industry. I've chosen, for debate purposes, to put it centre stage in terms of my introduction. But in general terms, what do you think's at stake here as Kate Forbes unveils a Scottish budget?
It's definitely set to be a challenging budget, despite the record amounts of money available at disposal. I would say, even if the amount of money is at a record high, sort of with a block grant higher than in any pre-pandemic year, the list of headwinds and challenges is also at an all-time high. I don't think there are going to be any big surprises in the budget today, given the recent news and the introduction of Plan B here in England last night and the press conference and all of the news around that. I do suspect there's going to be some extra leeway, some extra support for businesses, particularly those in the hospitality, in the travel sector, those that are set to be most impacted by new restrictions. So I would perhaps expect an announcement on that. But other than that, I think it has become tradition for the last few years in both Scotland and England that much of the budget is announced in advance. So other than perhaps some small boost to businesses in light of new restrictions and the new variant, we're probably not going to see many surprises.
Christine Jardine, let's talk to you, if we may. Do you think I've been a little bit mischievous in pointing out that Nicola Sturgeon's attitude towards the North Sea oil and gas industry seems to have changed somewhat, gone full circle, in fact, since the SNP has gone into coalition with the Greens at Holyrood?
You're absolutely on the money. It's not being mischievous, it's just pointing out what to the rest of us is absolutely clear. I mean, the SNP for years, the slogan was, it's Scotland's oil. And, as recently as the 2014 referendum, we've got all this money and I remember there was a story went about this massive elephant oil field that the oil industry was keeping secret. They'd sent people home and they weren't to talk about it because if news got out, then wow, it would show that independence was, going to be based on our oil wealth again. And it's wearing thin, I think, with most of the Scottish public. We know that the SNP's one overriding priority is independence, and they will use any argument they can. They will twist any argument they can. They will be for oil and gas if it suits. They will be against oil and gas if it suits. And what the rest of us want to see is a just transition to a more environmentally carbon-free, sustainable economy and sustainable energy industry. And actually our biggest allies in that are the oil and gas industry, because they need that too. They know that the oil and gas in the North Sea is running out and that's the way ahead. But as for the SNP, they are experts at, shrouding themselves in glory when they see something that they think will work for them and passing the buck to Nicola's been able to pass the buck for this one to Boris Johnson and his government and say, it's up to them. But you can bet if she thought there was a benefit in it for the SNP, she'd be claiming the credit. And we all know that the reality is that if we were to pull the plugs now on the North Sea oil and gas industry, we are not self-sufficient without them. Our energy security depends on it, and we would have to get oil and gas from places like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Then there are questions of human rights in those countries. There's also the question of your carbon footprint would be massive if we had to, transport oil and gas to this country. So for me, the whole oil and gas question is something that the SNP, every time they say something, they raise more questions than they give us answers.
Well, I must say, Christine, it's good to know that the Scottish Lib Dems think that we're on the money here on GB News. That's good to know. Colin, I meant...
Oh, don't quote me on that. I'll get into so much trouble.
I don't have to quote you. You just said it on national television anyway. Always good to have you on the show, Christine. Let's just switch to Colin. Colin, we don't have to make this entire discussion about oil and gas. You will have views on the Scottish budget. You speak for many small businesses that will be struggling, high street retailers, all the rest of it, hospitality industry, with the new anti-COVID restrictions that have come in the wake of Omicron. Though among that 100,000 people who depend on the North Sea oil and gas industry, it's not just the mighty oil and gas companies, is it? It's many small engineering companies, it's employment agencies, it's people making and providing and renting out protective equipment, it's people working in the marine industry in general. What do you think about the notion that the oil and gas industry in Scotland may disappear if the SNP have their way?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is obviously there is a supply chain there that we need to be very careful about. But I think what this points to is an issue that's not just in oil and gas, but it's across the Scottish economy, is that we have this problem where we are still over-reliant on a small number of large employers in particular sectors. And we've seen that, for example, with hospitality and others in the last 2 years, where the dip in that has had a real impact. So I think what we need to see today is some real action and steps to help small businesses deal with the issues that are really pressing them now, not what's going to happen in 20, 30 years, but how are they going to make it to Christmas? How are they going to get through what's going to be a very difficult start to 2022? So I think action today on how we can help small businesses reduce overheads, and also how we can get some sort of innovative funding mechanisms in there to help them with the challenges that are coming down the road at them, such as digital transformation and indeed the move to net zero, without levering in more money at a time when there is very little financial breathing space.
Jasmine, turning to you, no surprise the Scottish Tories want Boris Johnson to say, oh, I think the oil and gas industry is great in Scotland, given all these jobs. He hasn't said it yet, though, has he?
No, he hasn't. And I don't think he will, because he's held back also by the whole net zero thing. He stood up at COP26. He made all sorts of promises that he, frankly, probably can't keep. So, no, I think he needs to keep quiet about oil and gas. But I agree with you that it's going to be a political football.
I have no view. I'm just hosting a debate.
Of course you are. Of course you are. Absolutely. I agree with Christine then. Yes, why not? It's a political football, and when it's useful, it's our oil. When it's not, it's don't know whose oil it is because it's not ours.
This is really, though, where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? In terms of this COP26 agenda. There's lots of green jobs. Yes, I fully accept that. But there'll be jobs that will go if the agenda is fully seen through.
Absolutely. And what bothers me is the idea of we've all got to change it now. And this is why, one of the big reasons why we've got huge increases in the costs of our energy. It has to be gradual and it has to be discussed. What really annoys me about the whole sort of climate change issue is you may not discuss it. You're not allowed to have people, scientists, who are saying, oh, hold on a minute, is this really true? I would like to have more discussion, personally.
That's what this show is all about. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we will indeed keep this discussion going. Don't cancel us with Edinburgh West MP and Lib Dem Treasury spokesperson and my new best friend, Christine Jardine, the Director of Devolved Nations at the Federation of Small Businesses, Colin Borland, Nina Scaro, Chief Executive of the Centre for Economic and Business Research, and, of course, in the studio, Jasmine Birtles. Your emails are coming in, a tsunami of opinion. We'll be reading some of those shortly. Stay with us. You're on the money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. There's some wet weather around for all of us this evening, but for most of the day, much of central and eastern Britain dry and bright this afternoon. But in the west, we'll start to see the cloud thickening with some outbreaks of rain trickling in. This set of weather fronts responsible for that. The remnants of Storm Barra clearing away out into the North Sea. We're left with some cloud across the far northeast from that and the odd shower across northern Scotland around lunchtime. But it's this next weather front that will bring patchy rain to Northern Ireland, turning damp this afternoon for Wales and southwest England, whereas much of the Midlands, eastern England and the bulk of eastern Scotland dry and bright with some sunshine. Temperatures around about average for the time of year, turning a little milder in the southwest, but it will also be turning breezier and wetter. In fact, we'll all see some rain, I think, through this evening. That rain spreading over the Midlands into eastern England. Could get quite heavy for a time through the late part of the evening across East Anglia and the southeast before that scoots away during the early hours. And then skies start to clear once more and we're left with a few showers across the west. Will turn quite cold, and as it does so, we could just see things turning a little icy across parts of Scotland. So that's just something to be aware of first thing in the morning. Basically, it's a bright sunny start across much of eastern England and the south, and then we'll see showers developing through the day. Quite a few showers for northwest England, North Wales, Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Here the showers will come and go throughout. A few for South Wales, southwest England. The odd one getting further east, but much of eastern England, southern England, dry and fine. Temperatures again around average, but feeling a little colder because there will be a fairly brisk and chilly wind blowing tomorrow. That'll keep blowing in showers across these western areas well into Friday evening, whereas again further east largely dry and clear, and that hint of blue suggesting quite an early frost, leading to a chilly start to the weekend, but it will slowly turn milder. Bit of a mishmash this weekend. Won't rain all weekend, but there will certainly be some around, and it'll be breezy.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back, you're on the money. Now, ahead of the Scottish budget announcement this afternoon, we're discussing the North Sea oil and gas industry. I'm still with my expert panel, Christine Jardine, Edinburgh West MP, Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman, Colin Borland of the Federation for Small Businesses, Nina Scaro of the Centre for Economic Business Research, and in the studio, Jasmine Birtles, the founder of MoneyMagpie.com. Nina, let's go back to you if we can. What do you think then? How is this going to be resolved? If Nicola Sturgeon is dependent on the Green Party for her majority in Holyrood, they're going to continue to push for more and more adverse conditions, if you like, for the North Sea oil and gas industry, aren't they? And that will necessarily, inevitably, feed into the debate for Scottish independence.
I think all of the topics you have been discussing on the program, it's really a matter of the speed rather than the direction that the debate is going. And even ahead of the budget, it's been made clear that the so-called environmental emergency is going to be the number one priority. So I think the direction of policy making in that space is very clear. Something I will be looking out for today in the budget, as well as in the months ahead, is what is the suggestion in terms of how those revenues are going to be supplemented. I think there's been a lot more commentary on what we don't want rather than where are we going, than what is the future. A lot of the announcements that have been made ahead of the budget are focusing on the coming months and year or two in terms of supporting businesses after the pandemic, in terms of the amount of funding going into social care and healthcare, all very important questions that need to be addressed. But what we haven't heard much about is how does the future look 10 years from now? Where are the revenues going to come from?
Indeed.
I don't think higher taxes can be an answer. Scotland already has on a lot of measures higher taxes than other parts of the UK, and that hasn't really contributed to higher revenues. So I don't think that can be the answer. So I am curious to see, what is the future? There are budding tech hubs in Edinburgh, in Glasgow. Is something going to be done to support those industries? There is a very strong creative industry. Is that going to be thought of as the future? Just what is the future direction of travel?
Colin, let's go to you. I should say we did ask the SNP, of course, to appear in this debate. Perhaps they'll appear on the money sometime soon. They're always welcome, of course. Just put the case for Scotland, if you like. Are there aspects of the business environment in Scotland which are better for small businesses, for your members, than their counterparts south of the border?
Well, if you begin to drill right down into it, there's certain things that I think are really quite interesting in Scotland about how certain things are delivered. I think I mentioned previously about this idea of co-investment. So we've had a very successful programme here called Digital Boost, which lets you, as a small business, put down some money. The government then backs that up with significantly more money, and it lets you invest in sort of digital skills for yourself, for your staff, but also for equipment. And that proved so popular. We've done it twice now. Completely sold out, completely maxed out all the cash, literally within, I think, 24 hours or just over on both occasions. So that's incredibly popular. I think we need to be looking at other schemes like that and how we can expand that. So again, I think hopefully this afternoon we hear something positive about helping us with that digital transformation. But also, again, linking back to what you're talking about before about the transition to net zero. It's something that we've not done particularly well in Scotland for the last sort of 30, 40 years, is move away from reliance on one particular big industry to the next one. So you saw what happened in the 70s and 80s with the decline of heavy industry, particularly here, West Central Scotland. That was then replaced with the electronics industry and sunrise industries. As soon as that could be done cheaper elsewhere, they went, replaced with lower end financial services jobs. You saw what happened there. So we need to manage this transition properly, and I think that means getting small businesses in on the ground level, making sure that they can actually take advantage of it, and crucially that they can win some of the contracts that are going to come about as a result of that. So I think it's a case of examining all the options, seeing for the advantages, and then removing any barriers that are stopping us picking them up.
Jasmine, as the sort of honorary English person on the panel, I'm sort of half Irish, but anyway, how do you feel when you were sitting next to me when I read out that graphic earlier about the per head government spending in Scotland compared to England? Did I detect a slight sharp intake of breath from the money magpie?
Yeah, just a touch of bitterness there. Yes, absolutely. We in England, I think many people do, we feel like the poor relation of the whole United Kingdom. And yet, the Scottish Parliament is constantly complaining that they are done out of all sorts of money by national government. They have all sorts of goodies. You've got free tertiary education in Scotland. That would be lovely here, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. Let me put that to Christine. Christine, have you got any warm words for Jasmine here in the studio? She's an English person and she's feeling a bit put out at all that money going.
I think we all need to be careful.
South,
I think we all need to be careful
border.
because that is the SNP's modus operandi. Tell everybody in Scotland that they're hard done to so that they resent Westminster. Tell everybody in England, let everybody in England see just exactly, how well funded Scotland is by Westminster, so that both sides disagree. The SNP flourishes on grievance. They use it all the time, and we just have to be very careful that we don't allow it to come between us and the fact that the economic relationship that we have had between our four nations, it's the centenary, let's not forget, of the United Kingdom and of Great Britain and Northern Ireland this year. But the economic relationship we've had for 300 years has been good for all of us. We are stronger together than we are separately. And what I want to see from this budget today is an end to tribalism. To the Scottish nationalists, accept and recognise that we have had a lot of support from our other government, because it is our other government. It's not some strange non-Scottish thing, in another country. It is our government and we are represented in it. That the support that we have had through COVID-19 has been vital, and that we need that support to continue. I find from my constituents all the time that our biggest concern is net zero and the fact we're not moving towards it. COVID-19 is the other concern, but increasingly, independence is being sidelined by them. If they've got a small business, they want the support and the strength that the UK can offer. And that's what's becoming more important.
Christine, net zero might be a priority in Edinburgh West, a very well-heeled constituency, obviously close to the capital. But it's not such a big deal if you live in Aberdeen.
Well, believe me, I spent a decade of my life living in Aberdeen, and it is a huge issue in Aberdeen. Oil and gas industry, Shell, you mentioned earlier, they are practical. BP, Total, they are all mobile. They're all massive companies who have depended for a century on, carbon fuels, but they know that time is coming to an end. And they know that they have to transfer. If you speak to anybody, my family who live in Aberdeen and who work in the oil and gas industry, it's just as important to them, perhaps more, because they know that we need a transition, that we need a just transition, which stops the oil and gas industry becoming a victim of exactly what Colin talked about. This, one industry in which we're dependent in Scotland, and then, it goes out the door. And we have mass unemployment. And they are as concerned, if not more concerned, than the rest of Scotland about having a just transition which uses their skills, their know-how, their technical abilities, and their entrepreneurship, frankly, is without equal, I think, in much of the world. They
Christine,
know
we've got to leave it there,
that they need net zero.
We've got to leave it there. Thank you for a good discussion, all of you. Christine Jardine, of course, of the Lib Dems, Edinburgh West MP. Colin Borland from the Federation of Small Businesses. Nina Scarrow, nice to see you on the show from the Centre of Economic and Business Research. And, of course, the money magpie herself, Jasmine Birtles, who's a bit miffed about Scotland. On which note, we do want the SNP to come on the money. We're asking you to come on. Please do come on. We want to hear your point of view. It's obviously completely valid. Come on and have a chat with me and our growing audience. A few emails from you at home. Lots of you on the Scottish budget and the North Sea oil and gas industry. Elaine says the SNP don't like Aberdeen and the Northern Isles, so killing the North Sea oil industry will provide them benefits that are not just about pleasing the Greens. On Twitter, Angus says we're going to be using fossil fuels for decades to come. Let's utilise our abundant domestic resources rather than propping up faraway despotic regimes. And Christine says, why not invest in wave power? The technology exists. We don't need any more oil rigs. That's her view. Keep your emails coming. We read them all, and we're always pleased to hear from you. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be speaking to the pawnbroker James Constantinou. He'll be telling us how his business fared during lockdown and sharing with us some of the strangest items he's seen over the years. But before that, here's the GB News headlines with Olivia Guthrie.
Good afternoon. Here are the latest headlines. The Cabinet Secretary will now investigate 3 alleged parties in Downing Street and Whitehall during lockdown last year. Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis says they're looking into several claims. He also says the Cabinet Office will liaise with police if anything illegal is uncovered. The investigation follows a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about breaking restrictions just days after one of the alleged events. Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. New restrictions include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, and guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. The Conservative Party has been fined almost £18,000 over the redecoration of Boris Johnson's Downing Street flat. The Electoral Commission says it failed to accurately report a donation and keep a proper accounting record. A party spokesperson said they were considering an appeal. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson and his wife Carrie have announced the birth of a baby girl at a London hospital earlier today. It's the couple's second child after the birth of their son Wilfred in April 2020. A spokeswoman for the couple said both mother and daughter are doing very well. I'll have more on all of today's main stories at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, we've been looking ahead to the Scottish budget announcement, which will happen shortly after this episode of On the Money ends. But just to finish off our coverage, we're going to cross live now to South Queensferry, where our Scottish reporter, Davy Donaldson, is. Davy, very good to see you. Very good to have you on the show. What are you expecting in Kate Forbes' announcement this afternoon?
Well, I think it could be something different, but a lot of businesses across Scotland are certainly expecting some money in terms of helping them recover from the pandemic, which is ongoing. We know that obviously tourism and the hospitality industry have been heavily affected with regards to the restrictions that have been put in place, obviously having to close and then having to reopen with restrictions. So they'll be certainly looking for some money. Whether they get the money they're looking for is anyone's guess. Obviously, Kate Forbes will make that announcement. We're expecting round about 3:25 this afternoon, so we'll find out more then. But of course, this £40 billion budget, 40% of it's taken up with health, so that doesn't leave that much to play with. A lot of people would maybe say something else, but obviously there's the child payment as well. That's doubled in Scotland, so that's another commitment from the SNP, which means less money to put elsewhere. There's also the free travel, the free bus travel for young people, another commitment where again that eats into the cash as well. So will we see a tax increase? Well, we'll know more later on, but certainly that would be hugely unpopular. And as I say, businesses here and the tourism industry, as I say, hospitality industry, really looking to get some money from the government or money from the Scottish Government to make sure that they can continue in business. And we've seen businesses fold during the pandemic, so that's very pivotal. And a lot of people, that I've heard, that's exactly what they want to see.
Now, you've forgotten more about Scottish politics than I'll ever know, but in the run-up to this budget, I just tried to put it in context in the terms of the block grant and government spending per head, which of course is higher north of the border, but in particular in terms of the North Sea oil and gas industry. It does seem to me as if the First Minister, since she's been in coalition with the Greens in Holyrood, has really changed her tune in terms of SNP support for Scottish oil and gas. It used to be the kind of central pillar of their case for independence. How do you think Nicola Sturgeon's sort of full-on environmentalism will change Scottish politics in the months and years ahead?
Well, that is anyone's guess, but you're right in saying that, before the SNP was certainly behind oil and gas. That seems to have changed with this coalition with the Green Party. Obviously, that was presumably to try and get them on board so they had the majority in the Scottish Parliament to basically do as they like and push through whatever they want. So that she's obviously had to maybe tone that down a bit. But certainly, if you look in the northeast of Scotland and further north, where the oil fields are, places like Shetland and just off the coast of Orkney, then a lot of people will be extremely unhappy with this lack of support. We heard Douglas Ross come out yesterday in First Minister's questions and criticise that lack of support for the oil and gas industry. So it does remain to be seen, how she's going to balance that. The support for jobs in the oil and gas industry, and let's not forget, that takes in millions and millions of pounds every year, if not billions. So it's a tricky one for her to balance that against, as you say, the environmental side of things as well. More will become clear, I think, at 3:25, but even just beyond this budget, I think, and that's a balancing act for Nicola Sturgeon. How she copes with that, well, that will come out in due course. But that is a difficult one for her. There's no doubt about that. The budget's going to be tricky as well. I don't think it's going to be particularly popular, but as I say, we'll know more round about 3:30 this afternoon.
Good to talk, Davey. As ever, Davey Donaldson there, GB News Scotland correspondent. Now, it's time for our regular feature where we celebrate some of the UK's most interesting companies. Yes, here it is. It's Startup Britain. Now, the pawnbroking industry, which offers loans to people in exchange for valuable items, is one of the oldest industries of our time, having begun around 3,000 years ago in ancient China. But in the UK today, it's estimated to have a market the size of a whopping £255 million. That's why our guest today, James Constantinou, saw an opportunity in the industry and founded Prestige Pawnbrokers back in 2009. Since then, he's had many weird and wonderful items brought to him in return for cash, such as a Charles and Diana wedding cake, a Second World War memorabilia, and the world's largest pearl. James's business has continually grown over the last decade, and he now owns shops up and down the country. Here to tell us more, it's James Constantinou. James, good to see you here on The Money. Thank you for joining us. Now, your business has been around for a while, but we thought we'd feature it because this is quite an interesting sector. Please set out the defence, if you like, for pawnbroking, because with all due respect, it is quite a controversial sector.
Well, I know. I mean, it's had a bit of bad press over the years, and maybe rightly so, historically, maybe sort of 50 or sort of during the war and pre-war. The sector wasn't, might have had a few rogues involved with it, but it's cleaned its act up, certainly over the last 30 or 40 years. We're FCA regulated. And
that's the Financial Conduct Authority, our highest financial regulator in Britain.
That's it. And I mean, everything is, the operation is looked at. I mean, we're monitored, and everything is, in terms of borrowing money, you can't really get your hands on cash quicker. If you've got the asset and you can bring it into us, then there's no faster way of borrowing money.
Now, a lot of people who do pawn, a wedding ring, a family heirloom or something, they're often under financial pressure, right? Because they end up paying quite a high rate of interest, don't they? What kind of rates of interest might people end up paying in your business and across the industry?
Well, look, the rate of interest is a sort of typical comment that comes up every now and again. You wouldn't, if you're looking at just the rate of interest, you could argue that it was quite high.
Because I've heard reported 50, 60, 80%. Even.
Yeah, OK. Well, look, we do, the interest is monthly. So I'll give you an example. We lent 100 grand to someone.
Yeah.
They lent it, they borrowed it for 1 month.
Yeah.
It cost them 2.9% a month. So they borrowed £100,000 for 2.9%, which is £2,900. I don't know of anywhere in Europe
now
that you can
that's
borrow.
Cheap. The trouble is, if you can't pay it back in a month, it then compounds and compounds and compounds.
Well, of course. I mean, if you can't pay your debt back from the bank, they might repossess your house. So there's all that to consider. I mean, look, if you're talking about short-term borrowing, before 3 months, if you can pay it back, it's probably cheaper than a bank. If you're talking about 6, 7 and 8 months, then, you're right. It's not ideal.
So tell us about some of the interesting objects that you've seen pawned. I mean, pawnbrokers often appear in Dickens, don't they, throughout literature. They often appear at sort of pivotal moments in people's lives when people have died, people are getting married, there's flux in families, and interesting items come up for pawning, don't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, you never know what's going to walk through the door, and that's one of the reasons that I was attracted to the business, because it seemed quite exciting. And I mean, we didn't want to open a pawn shop and be sort of your typical high street lender in that respect. We were looking at the high end of the market, and we knew we were going to see some very unusual stuff. I mean, we've seen letters associated with Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones that were found in his attic. So you never really know what's going to come. And it's not always the high value stuff either. It can be something that's just quite interesting, to be honest with you.
And of course, the idea is that you pay back the loan and you get whatever it is that you've pawned back. If not, you guys sell it, right? It ends up in the window of the pawnbrokers. How often does that happen? What kind of percentage of objects that are pawned end up back with their owner?
Well, I think this is another misconception. They think it's a high, but it's about 18%. So out of every 100 items, 18 of them would end up in a public sale or in our window. So it's a small minority.
Yeah, relatively small, yeah. And Charles and Diana's wedding cake, really?
Well, that was a piece of cake, yeah. I mean, that came in. We looked at that.
A piece of the cake?
A piece of the cake.
How could you verify it was what it was?
Well, it came with some documentation, so that was OK. We knew
Hadn't it gone off?
Well, yeah, it's not edible, let's put it that way. But, I mean, that was just a very interesting item that came in. It's not got a huge value. I think it's probably worth about £1,000 or something like that.
For a mouldy old piece of cake?
Well, you know, it's got some interesting history behind it. But, I mean, it's just a wonderful thing that came through the door. And this is what we like. You know, my team has set up for that. We've got the best sort of experts in the industry, and they can look at this sort of stuff, do their research, and it makes it all very interesting.
Now, you're obviously a successful person. You're running a business which ticks all the legal boxes. Obviously, we examine businesses before we give them a platform on national television. You've run your business in a pretty exemplary way over the years, so hats off to you. I'm not giving you a hard time, but I'm asking you a question as an economist, if you like. Does pawnbroking become more popular? Do more people use pawnbrokers when the economy turns down, there's more unemployment? Are you an anti-cyclical business in the economist jargon?
There's no doubt about it that when the economy's on a downturn, the need for our services are increased. I can't deny it. But that doesn't make it a bad thing. I think, look, the point is, I'm hearing on a daily basis people coming into our stores saying, thank God you're here, because another 2 months I wouldn't be able to send my children to their school.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't.
So they're pawning stuff for school fees, right?
It could be school fees, it could be dental work, it could be...
And the bank won't touch them, right?
Listen, if you want to go to the bank, you've got to jump through hoops. You might have to wait 3 or 4 months. By then, for most people, it'll be over. The need for it will be, be negated.
So it's fast cash, really?
It's fast cash. If you've got...
But in a legal context?
It's totally legal. It's above board.
Because the alternative, I guess, are the sort of doorstep lenders, many of whom are legal, of course. We're not dissing all doorstep lending, payday loans companies, but some of them are a bit twilight, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the big thing to remember here is that we're taking someone's asset, we're storing it safely, it's insured, we're lending some money against it, they're aware of the costs, monthly costs, and at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen is that we will send that to sale. That's the worst thing that can happen. We're not going to give them bad credit score. We're not going to repossess their house. We're not going to put a black mark on their name. I mean...
And when you sell it, the loan's wiped out, right?
And also, if we sell it for more than what's owed, the client will get the balance back. I mean, there's not many operations you can claim that it works in that way. I think it's a win-win.
Is pawnbroking growing across the UK? Is it growing across the Western world? Is it very prevalent across the emerging markets, the developing world?
Well, I think that, I mean, look, nothing's really growing at the moment in that sector, but I think coming out of the pandemic, we're going to see a boom for sure, because there's going to be a need for people to get their hands on fast cash. There's going to be a lot of emerging businesses coming out of what's happened, and obviously people are going to be in need of these services. If you've got the asset, if you've got a Ferrari sitting there, or a piece of art, or some fine wine, or a piece of jewellery, a watch, a ring, and you need a few grand, then you can bring it into us and you can have it the same day. There's not many people out there that can offer that service.
Of course, in literature, in history, pawnbroking, it's generally been, with all due respect, a kind of working class thing. A family needs to eat, or they need to... In my own family's history, by the way, pawning things to give somebody a passage to America from London, Liverpool, Ireland, or something. So working people can get enough cash quickly to make big changes in their lives. That's the risk they take. Are you now seeing more sort of upmarket pawnbroking, if you like?
100%. I mean, as I said before, sort of the typical image of pawnbroking was in a sort of Dickensian style London.
You used to have sort of mutton chops and little round glasses.
Exactly. But I mean, it's just not like that. I mean, we see business people coming in to use our services. They know that it's cheaper than a bank short term.
As long as they can get the money back.
If they've got a plan to bring back to put the money back in within 3 or 4 months, it's cheaper than a bank. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But, and as I said, at the end of the day, if it goes on longer than that, the worst thing that can happen is that item will be sold.
Have you ever pawned, or do companies pawn, excuse my ignorance, say I'm running a business, I've got a fixed asset, I've got a factory, I've got machinery bolted to the floor.
Yeah.
You're not going to store that, but you can then get a legal right over that. I mean, have you done pawnbroking deals where the asset stays where it is because it's just too big to move?
To be quite honest with you, I try and avoid it, but it can be done.
It can be done. You've heard of it.
Company assets are something that can be pawned. I mean, it's quite complicated. It's a little bit more long-winded, but it's achievable, yeah.
Very interesting. So what's the future for your business? Are we going to see a posh pawnbroker in every high street?
Well, I think the brand is not really suitable. It's not that sort of end of the market.
Okay.
We've got about 5 stores in London and the suburbs at the moment. We've got a Manchester store, one down in Brighton. We're growing for sure, and we're opening more stores. We're definitely going to see a need for that type of lending over the next few years, and I think it's going to run on for quite some time. So I'm expanding. I'm opening more branches. There might not be one on every street corner, but there's certainly room for more.
And how does the UK compare to the rest of the world? Are we a pawnbroking hub? Is it a niche industry here compared to other countries?
Well, I think that America led the way in terms of pawnbroking, and even in terms of their... I mean, I first thought of the idea because I read an article on the Americans lending against art. So I thought, well, how can we sort of bring that into the UK? And that's how it sort of evolved from there. The Europeans, the rest of the European countries are not so maybe advanced in terms of that high-end pawnbroking. There are gold lenders in other countries, and now I think there's some sort of other companies set up, but not in the way that we are here in the UK. I definitely think it's a growing market.
And do you think the regulatory structure, the regulatory regime around your industry is broadly fair? I mean, I guess you do, because you're still in the business and you're still trying to grow the firm that you founded.
I mean, look, it's set up. It's aimed at protecting the consumer, and
rightly so.
Rightly so. Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. So that's a great thing for us. If you're following the rules and you're abiding by the stipulations, and you've got a contract that's offered to the client, it's it's FCA regulated. You can't really go wrong. I mean, the operators that do not abide by these rules will soon be shut down for sure.
Very interesting. It's certainly a sector we'll be looking at here more on the money. We look forward to staying in touch with you, James Constantinou of Posh Pawnbrokers. All the very best.
Thank you.
You've been watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be back for more economics, business and consumer news at 1 p.m. tomorrow with our special 2-hour bumper show. You lucky people. And I'll be here in a minute with Gloria Di Piero. Who's she? This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. There's some wet weather around for all of us this evening, but for most of the day, much of central and eastern Britain dry and bright this afternoon. But in the west, we'll start to see the cloud thickening with some outbreaks of rain trickling in. This set of weather fronts responsible for that. The remnants of Storm Barra clearing away out into the North Sea. We're left with some cloud across the far northeast from that, and the odd shower across northern Scotland around lunchtime. But it's this next weather front that will bring patchy rain to Northern Ireland, turning damp this afternoon for Wales and southwest England, whereas much of the Midlands, eastern England and the bulk of eastern Scotland dry and bright with some sunshine. Temperatures around about average for the time of year, turning a little milder in the southwest, but it will also be turning breezier and wetter. In fact, we'll all see some rain, I think, through this evening. That rain spreading over the Midlands into eastern England. Could get quite heavy for a time through the late part of the evening across East Anglia and the southeast before that scoots away during the early hours. And then skies start to clear once more, and we're left with a few showers across the west. Will turn quite cold, and as it does so, we could just see things turning a little icy across parts of Scotland. So that's just something to be aware of first thing in the morning. Basically, it's a bright sunny start across much of eastern England and the south, and then we'll see showers developing through the day. Quite a few showers for northwest England, North Wales, Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Here the showers will come and go throughout. A few for South Wales, southwest England. The odd one getting further east, but much of eastern England, southern England, dry and fine. Temperatures, again, around average, but feeling a little colder because there will be a fairly brisk and chilly wind blowing tomorrow. That'll keep blowing in showers across these western areas well into Friday evening.